some people may be throwing up when they see the power rankings, but we're 5 weeks in. Teams are starting to settle in. There is a lot of movement, though. I can't quite make like the middle third of the league. They move around all the time. The top is the top. The bottom is the bottom. These are the power rankings presented by our friends at Toyota. The top three unchanged: 49ers, Eagles, Chiefs. And the 49ers are locked in at number one. They're staying there until they lose, and they may even stay there if they do lose at some point. They have a showdown with the Eagles coming up later this year. A lot of people would like to see that game sooner rather than later. Top 10, people... Why are the Seahawks at 6? Well, who else is going to be at 6? Why are the Jaguars at 7? Who else is going to be at 7? Where are the teams with one loss, or the Jaguars have 2, but where are the great teams? The Cowboys dropped down to 9, as they should, after getting their asses kicked by the 49ers. I mean, there are not a lot of great teams this year, Charean, and it makes me even more confident that the 49ers are going to be standing there at or near the end of the road, because you look around the league, who's in a position to compete with the very best teams in football? And the 49ers, in my mind, they're very best. They're 1, and even though the Eagles are 5-0, there's a gap between the 5-0 49ers and the 5-0 Eagles in my mind.
My absolute first thought when I looked at this, I'm like, why are the Seahawks 6? And then I was like, who are you going to put there? Like, you start looking at it, there's like 5 really good teams, I think, on that list. And then I look at the bottom of the list, there's probably 7 really bad teams. I don't know, 5, 6, 7, somewhere in there, bad teams. And then there's just this lump in the middle that some of those teams are going to make the playoffs. Some of them are not going to make the playoffs, but it's hard to say right now which of those teams in that lump are going to make the playoffs. They're all just kind of there. So, yeah, I don't know that there's many more teams than the top 5. I know you like the Seahawks. Well, as you said, we're going to find out around Thanksgiving what they have. But there's not many teams below that I would even say have any sort of chance to do anything. And maybe the Bengals. I mean, the Bengals looked really good. Joe Burrow looked good. Maybe they get on a run there. They're at, 22 right now. Maybe that's the team that moves up on this list very quickly. Maybe they get up into that top 5, 6 in a hurry if Joe Burrow continues to play like he played. But yeah, it's very there's just a few teams I think at the top, Mike, and that's really what stood out to me. Who do you put at 6?
There's always that team at or around Thanksgiving that begins to figure it out, that gets hot, that knows they are a loss or 2 away from elimination, and they start winning and winning and winning. And they win enough, and they've experienced that playoff mentality for enough weeks of the regular season that it carries over very nicely into the actual postseason, and they become a dangerous out in the playoffs. That's what the best teams need to worry about. That 1 or 2 team per conference that is going to find their groove late, get in by the skin of their teeth, have nothing to lose, and can show up and knock you out, especially if you're the team that has the bye and didn't play wild card weekend, while that low-seeded team built even more confidence, validated its late season run by winning a wild card game, and then they come in, they catch you early with an uppercut, and the next thing you know, you're done. That's the concern for the 2-1 seeds this year. I think even for the 49ers, it really doesn't matter. Now, we showed the back half of the power rankings, and I violated one of my, and I don't have many rules when it comes to the power rankings, but one of the loose unwritten rules is that if you're the last winless team, you're last in the power rankings. I gave the Panthers a reprieve. They had been 31. They stayed at 31. I can't ignore what's going on with the Patriots. When you lose 38-3 to the Cowboys, a game that, hey, they're not the only team that's going to lose 38-3 to these Cowboys. You get on the wrong side of the Dallas Avalanche, it goes 14-0, 17-0, 24-0. Before you know it, it is 38-3. That's how it goes when the Cowboys come up against a team that they are physically more dominant than. But when you follow it up after having the worst loss ever in the Bill Belichick era, the worst loss he's ever suffered as an NFL head coach, you come home against a beatable Saints team and you don't score a single freaking point, You lose 34-0 to the Saints at home. Combined score in 2 games of 72-3. Are you kidding me? That is your ticket to 32. Right now, the Patriots are the worst team in football. And maybe they'll turn it around and beat the Raiders. Hey, just because the Raiders beat the Packers on Monday night does not mean the Raiders are an easy victor over the Patriots. You got the whole Bill Belichick, Josh McDaniels, Jimmy Garoppolo angle. The Patriots know Garoppolo well. They'll know how to confuse him and confound him. But even if the Patriots beat the Raiders, I mean, they're just done. There's no coming back from 38-3, 34-0. When you look at the talent level on that team, there's no coming back from it. And I'm reluctant to say it because I don't need this played back in January. If the Patriots somehow pull a rabbit out of their hat and make it to the playoffs. But how would it happen? Bill Belichick says they're starting over. Starting over with what? You're going to fire the team and get new players? What can you do to start over and make this team better, Charean? Right now, they deserve to be number 32, and the question is, how long will they stay there, and how high will they ever even get? Are they ever getting out of that fourth column of 25 to 32? I don't think they're going to do that this year.
Well, Mike, the best play for them right now might be tanking for Caleb Williams, frankly, and I think that would be a place that he would want to go, regardless of who the coach ends up being next year, because he saw what Tom Brady did in New England. He saw Robert Kraft hire the coach and could help construct that team by hiring the right coach, Bill Belichick, who buys the groceries and cooks the meals both for them. So they were 5-11 in 2000. This is the worst team I think they've had since then. They were 8-9 last year. This team is worse than last year's team. Are they sellers at the trade deadline? I'd be sellers if I were them. I would tank for Caleb Williams. The question becomes, Mike, what happens to Bill Belichick? If he's not in New England last year, I don't think he retires, but where does he end up if he's not in New England?
Well, let me back up a step, because you've intrigued me with the tanking suggestion. And there is a very real business reason. And the NFL tries to ignore the connection between the worst team in a given regular season and the best position in the draft. They want to hype that up. Ooh, number one pick. But they don't want to talk about how the team got it, because they don't want to acknowledge the fact that there is a very real temptation from a business standpoint. When you know you're not going to the playoffs, who cares if you're 3-14, 4-13, 2-15, 1-16? Nobody cares. Nobody even remembers what your final record was. All that matters is you didn't make the playoffs. And, oh, you got the first overall pick in the draft. Bravo. Let's go see what we can do. But how do you implement a tank if you're New England? Because Bill Belichick's still going to try to win. Bill Belichick isn't going to go along with it, especially if he knows he's not going to be there next year. He's not going to play Will Grier at quarterback, and actually that may make them better at this point, but he's not going to go along with some, ruse of we're going to evaluate our young players, so we're going to empty the bench and we're going to let nature take its course. And yeah, they're not going to try to lose, but they're not capable of winning because they're backups for a reason. He's just not going to do that. They almost would have to fire him mid-season and hand the reins to someone else and just kind of grease the skids even further toward a natural tank, something that doesn't look like a tank. It's just got to end with Belichick, because we don't need him pulling together 3 or 4 wins at the end of the season just to stick it to us and keep us from getting Caleb Williams as we move forward without him. That's the wrinkle here. At some point, maybe he does get hot. At some point, maybe he does rally and win a few games because he knows it's ending. I don't know. But if they're serious about trying to position themselves for Caleb Williams, I don't know that having Belichick as the coach through the end of the year is the right way to make it happen, because he's not going to be on board with any strategic plan to tank, Charean.
Well, I think you trade some of your top players. I think that's one way you probably do it. And maybe they don't even have to tank for Caleb Williams. Maybe they're bad enough. Maybe they are the 32nd team, Mike. Maybe they're bad enough that they're just going to keep losing like this the rest of the year. I don't know how you turn it around. I mean, they don't have any great options, as you said, at quarterback. Bailey Zappi or Will Grier. I mean, you're right. Maybe Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi and Will Grier are all the same player, and they're going to keep turning the ball over, 6 turnovers in the last 2 games. And if you keep doing that, you're not going to win anyway. So maybe they don't even have to, quote unquote, tank. Maybe they just do it naturally because they're just not any good right now.
Well, and I think that becomes the right way to consider how this could go. The Crafts just need to kind of hope and secretly root for things to unfold the way they've already started to. You mentioned the possibility of trading away some of your best players. Bill Belichick's in charge. Why would he trade away players now for draft picks he's not going to be there to use? He doesn't care. You know, his parting shot would be, let me screw up their draft position as much as I can. Let me get as many wins as I can, because those wins keep stacking up, and it makes it easier for me to catch Don Shula if I go somewhere else. And he's got pride and ego. He doesn't want to go 1-15. It's 1-16. He doesn't want to go 2-15. He doesn't want to have that on his record. He doesn't want that. So he's going to keep trying to win each and every week. He's not going to change. That's something Tom Brady said this week on the Let's Go podcast. He's not going to change his style. The problem is his style isn't currently working. So I think that they can't tank, but maybe they just will be bad. And maybe this will continue, and they won't find any way out of it. You asked the question, what does Bill Belichick do next? I don't think Bill Belichick falls into the category of guy who instantly, automatically, without question, gets hired somewhere else. Because anybody that would want him would have to be willing not just to fire the coach, you got to fire the GM, and you got to hand the keys to Bill Belichick. And it's going to take time if he goes somewhere else. Remember Gary Myers was pushing the idea a few years back when the Garoppolo-Brady stuff came to a head, that in the aftermath of that, and Seth Wickersham had some reporting about dysfunction internally, the Garoppolo camp, the Brady camp, that maybe Belichick wanted to go coach the Giants. The problem is, anywhere he goes, he's going to need 5 years or thereabouts to get everything in place the way he's got it in place in New England. Does he really have 5 years? Does he want to spend 5 years building it up somewhere else? Now, maybe he'd be attracted by a team that has a franchise quarterback. Maybe if the Chargers job comes open. But again, Dean Spanos would have to be willing to fire everybody. You got to fire the whole lot of them if you're going to attract Bill Belichick, and you got to be willing to hand him the keys and not be involved. You got to get out of the way, because if you come sniffing around, he's going to give you that dirty look, and you're going to run out the door.
Yeah, and that's what you'd have to be willing to do, Mike. And maybe it is a place like the Chargers. Maybe it is a place like the Raiders. I don't know how much he can win with the Raiders with Jimmy Garoppolo, but maybe that's an option. I don't know, but you're right. It would take a lot for a team to hire Bill Belichick and know what they're getting into with Bill Belichick. But again, it's one of those things. If you want to win and you think he's the answer to your team, if you're the Chargers and you're sitting there looking at it and say, we've got a team that's underachieved for the last 3 seasons, all we need is a good head coach, then maybe you do that. Maybe that's the move you make. Maybe that's the all-in move that you make, is go get Bill Belichick.
Well, but that's the thing. Okay, and we know that fan reaction, that's a big part of it. Like, going to get Bill Belichick 5 years ago has a different vibe now than getting Bill Belichick now.
No question.
Early 70s. What's he done without Tom Brady? Hey, are you bringing Tom Brady out of retirement too? Like, why do we want Bill Belichick? And, you know, he's got that personality and that interaction with others that is not pleasant. There's not a lot of emotional intelligence inside Bill Belichick. He's won enough to overcome it. Where he is right now, I just think that there's a lot of fans out there of a lot of teams that wouldn't want Bill Belichick. They don't want to go down that path. We're going to sign on with a guy who possibly the game has passed him by. I don't know. I just don't think he's going to be the hot commodity he would have been a half a decade ago. And there's been some speculation that maybe at some point he'll go somewhere as executive VP of football operations. That is not a good job for a former coach, because coaches can't stop coaching. We've seen it with Bill Parcells. We've seen it with Mike Holmgren. We've seen it with Tom Coughlin.
Coughlin.
Coaches can't stop coaching, period. So, I don't know, Charean. It may be he doesn't get a chance to catch Don Shula. All it takes is one owner. I just don't know which owner will be the one to say, I'm comfortable handing the keys over to Bill Belichick right now. Would have done it 5 years ago. I would have run to do it 10 years ago. Right now, is this really in the best interest of my franchise? 72-year-old head coach who has had 5 not good years without Tom Brady, who had a disastrous final season in New England. How do I sell that to my fan base? It's amazing to even put it in those terms, but I think we're not being fair to reality if we don't.
Well, and I think Bill Belichick would have to settle for a lot less money, too. No one's going to pay him what the Patriots are paying. I don't see that. I mean, he's got to take a step back money-wise because you're right. He's not the same head coach that we viewed 5 years ago as he is today. It's a different Bill Belichick. He hasn't been able to sustain the success since Tom Brady left.
The other thing we don't know about Belichick's situation, and I doubt that this would cause Robert Kraft to keep him around if he's ready to move on. We don't know anything about his contract. We don't know how long it's in place for. We don't know what the buyout would be. But again, it doesn't matter because there's no good reason to continue this after this year. It really is funny how quickly it's fallen apart. But 72-3 will do that. 38-3, kind of understandable embarrassment to the Cowboys, followed by 34-0 at home to a Saints team that I thought they would beat, and many thought they would beat. The wheels have come off, and the Patriots deserve to be number 32, and we'll see how it goes the rest of the year. We've never experienced this before. One of the great dynasties in NFL history, the one team that cracked the code post-free agency and won 6 championships, is now lost in the wilderness. How do they find themselves, and where will Bill Belichick find himself next year? Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.